Ulysses' feathers ruffled anxiously as his sharp eyes tracked every movement in the elegant living room. The African grey parrot perched on his stand near the window, observing Rosalie as she tidied up the ornate Victorian house that had been in her family for generations. She hummed softly while arranging fresh flowers in a crystal vase, unaware of the tension building in her feathered companion. The house had been unusually quiet these past few days. Felix, the neighbour's boy who often visited to play with Ulysses, hadn't come by, and this absence disturbed the bird deeply. The parrot had grown attached to the child, who would spend hours teaching him new words and phrases, sharing secrets that only a bird could be trusted to keep. "What's wrong, Ulysses?" Rosalie asked, noticing the parrot's agitation. The usually chatty bird had been uncharacteristically silent, aside from occasional mutterings that Rosalie couldn't quite make out. Ulysses cocked his head, fixing his intelligent eyes on Rosalie. "Basement! Basement!" he suddenly squawked, his voice clear and urgent. Rosalie froze, a chill running down her spine despite the warm spring air flowing through the open windows. "What did you say?" "Basement! Basement! Felix! Help!" The parrot flapped his wings frantically, repeating the words with increasing desperation. Rosalie set down the vase with trembling hands. Felix had indeed been missing for 2 days. His parents, the Millers, lived in the house next door, and the community had been searching non-stop since his disappearance. Police had combed the neighborhood, volunteers had searched the nearby woods, but there had been no sign of the boy. "Felix is in a basement," Rosalie whispered, approaching Ulysses cautiously. "Whose basement, Ulysses?" The parrot bobbed his head agitatedly. "Bad man, basement, Felix crying." A cold knot formed in Rosalie's stomach. Ulysses had an uncanny ability to mimic sounds and conversations he'd heard, but this was different. It was as if he was trying to communicate something specific, something urgent. She grabbed her phone and dialed Tyler, a local police officer who had been coordinating the search for Felix. "Tyler, it's Rosalie," she said as soon as he answered. "This is going to sound crazy, but I think my parrot knows where Felix is." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Your parrot?" "Yes, Ulysses. He keeps saying basement and Felix together. He's never done this before. I think he might have seen or heard something." Another pause. "Rosalie, we've checked every house in the neighborhood, including basements. I know it sounds absurd, but Ulysses is extremely intelligent. He wouldn't be this agitated without reason. Please, just come by and listen to him." Tyler agreed, though Rosalie could hear the skepticism in his voice. She couldn't blame him. It did sound ridiculous, but she knew Ulysses, and she trusted his behavior meant something important. While waiting for Tyler to arrive, Rosalie tried to coax more information from Ulysses. "Where is Felix, Ulysses? Can you tell me more?" The parrot's response chilled her to the bone. In a perfect imitation of Felix's voice, Ulysses whimpered, "Help me, please, dark down here." Then, in what sounded like an adult male voice Rosalie didn't recognize, "Shut up, kid, or you'll never see daylight again." Rosalie stepped back, her hand covering her mouth. Ulysses had clearly witnessed something terrible. But where? And when? Tyler arrived 20 minutes later, accompanied by another officer named Irene. Their expressions were a mixture of professional concern and barely concealed doubt. "I know how this sounds," Rosalie began, leading them to Ulysses' perch, "but just listen to him." As if on cue, Ulysses began his distressed calls again. "Felix! Basement! Help! Dark basement!" Tyler and Irene exchanged glances. "Has your parrot been outside recently?" Tyler asked. "Yes, I often take his cage to the porch on nice days. He was outside the day before Felix disappeared." "And he could have heard or seen something from there," Irene observed, her skepticism giving way to consideration. "Basement with blue door," Ulysses suddenly added, ruffling his feathers. "Man with scar, hurt Felix." Tyler's expression sharpened. "Blue door." "Walter's house," Rosalie gasped. "Walter has a blue door to his basement. It's visible from the side of his house." Walter Davis lived 3 houses down, a reclusive man who rarely participated in neighborhood activities. He had moved in less than a year ago, and few people knew much about him. "We checked Walter's house yesterday," Tyler said, his brow furrowing. "He let us look around, including his basement." "But Did you see everything? Rosalie pressed. Ulysses is trying to tell us something specific. Blue door inside, the parrot insisted, becoming increasingly agitated. Irene pulled Tyler aside, whispering something Rosalie couldn't hear. After a moment, Tyler nodded and turned back to Rosalie. Walter didn't let us see his entire basement. He said part of it was undergoing renovation and was unsafe. We did a quick sweep of the main area, but we need to go back, Irene said firmly. Better to check again than miss something crucial. They decided Rosalie should stay behind with Ulysses, while the officers returned to Walter's house with a more specific focus. Before leaving, Tyler gave Rosalie a stern warning. Don't try to investigate this yourself. If Walter is involved in Felix's disappearance, he could be dangerous. Rosalie nodded, though anxiety gnawed at her. Every minute felt precious if Felix was indeed trapped somewhere. After the officers left, Ulysses became calmer, as if relieved that his message had finally been understood. He settled on his perch, occasionally murmuring "Felix" softly. Rosalie paced the living room, unable to sit still. The minutes stretched into an hour, with no word from Tyler. Unable to bear the waiting any longer, she decided to call him. Just as she reached for her phone, it rang. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. Rosalie. His voice was tense with suppressed excitement. We found a hidden door in Walter's basement. It was disguised as part of the wall painted blue on the inside. We're getting a warrant to search beyond it right now. Rosalie's heart raced. And Felix? We haven't found him yet, but there were signs of recent activity. Walter is claiming he knows nothing about a hidden room, but his behavior is suspicious. We're keeping him under surveillance while we wait for the warrant. Rosalie glanced at Ulysses, who was watching her intently. Please hurry, she said. If Felix is in there. We're moving as fast as we can. I'll call you as soon as we know more. After hanging up, Rosalie sat beside Ulysses' perch, gently stroking his feathers. You're amazing, you know that. You might have just saved Felix's life. Ulysses preened under the attention, but his eyes remained alert, fixed on the window facing Walter's house in the distance. The next hour was excruciating. Rosalie tried to distract herself with household tasks, but her mind kept conjuring horrifying images of Felix, trapped in a dark basement, scared and alone. Why would Walter take him? What possible reason could he have for kidnapping a child from the neighborhood? When her phone finally rang again, Rosalie nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. We found him, Tyler said, his voice thick with emotion. Felix is alive. He was tied up in a hidden room beyond that blue door. He's dehydrated and frightened, but the paramedics say he'll be okay. Tears of relief spilled down Rosalie's cheeks. Oh, thank God. And Walter? In custody. He tried to run when we breached the hidden room, but we were ready for that. Rosalie, we would never have found that room without your parrot's clue. The entrance was completely concealed. Walter had created what looked like a solid wall. Rosalie looked at Ulysses with newfound wonder. He's always been smart, but this is something else. We're still trying to understand Walter's motives, Tyler continued. From what we can gather so far, it appears he targeted Felix because the boy witnessed something he shouldn't have. We found evidence in the hidden room suggesting Walter is involved in some kind of illegal operation. Rosalie remembered how Felix would often explore the neighborhood, his curious nature leading him to observe everything and everyone. Had he seen something incriminating at Walter's house? Felix's parents are with him now, Tyler added. Once he's calmed down, we'll get his statement. In the meantime, I'd like to bring a specialist to record Ulysses. His vocalizations might contain more clues about what Walter was up to. Of course, Rosalie agreed. Anything to help. After ending the call, Rosalie approached Ulysses with a treat. You're a hero, Ulysses. You saved Felix. The parrot took the treat delicately. Felix safe now? He asked, his head tilted questioningly. Rosalie nodded, marveling at the bird's comprehension. Yes, Felix is safe now, thanks to you. Ulysses seemed to relax at last, settling into his normal posture. But as Rosalie turned away, she heard him mumble something that made her pause. More bad men, not just Walter. She turned back, a chill running through her. What did you say, Ulysses? But the parrot had fallen silent, focusing intently on his treat as if nothing had happened. Rosalie stared at him, unsettled by the implication. If Ulysses was right, and he had been eerily accurate so far, then Walter wasn't working alone. There were others involved in whatever sinister plot had led to Felix's abduction, and if that was true, the danger might not be over yet. As twilight descended over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across Rosalie's living room, she realized that finding Felix might have been just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous mystery, one that Ulysses had somehow become central to unraveling. She watched as the parrot settled in for the night, his feathers fluffing up comfortably. Whoever had involved Felix in their dark dealings had made a critical mistake. They had never considered that their actions might be observed and remembered by a creature they would have dismissed as insignificant. A parrot with an extraordinary gift for mimicry and an unexpected capacity for justice. What else had Ulysses seen? What other secrets was he holding in that remarkable mind of his? And most importantly, who else might be in danger if Walter truly wasn't acting alone? Rosalie took a seat by the window, watching the police lights still flashing in the distance at Walter's house. One thing was certain: nothing in their quiet neighborhood would ever be the same again. The morning after Felix's rescue dawned bright and clear, but Rosalie found little comfort in the cheerful sunlight streaming through her windows. She had barely slept, her mind racing with questions about Walter, his mysterious operation, and Ulysses's ominous words. More bad men, not just Walter. The neighborhood had transformed overnight. Police vehicles still surrounded Walter's house, and news vans had begun to arrive, drawn by the dramatic story of a kidnapped boy saved by a parrot's testimony. Reporters had already knocked on Rosalie's door twice, eager to interview her about Ulysses' remarkable role in Felix's rescue. Rosalie kept the curtains drawn and ignored the knocking. She sat at her kitchen table, watching Ulysses as he methodically picked through his breakfast of fresh fruits and nuts. The parrot seemed unusually subdued, his normal morning chatter replaced by watchful silence. "What else did you see, Ulysses?" she asked softly. "What aren't you telling us?" Ulysses paused his eating, fixing her with one bright eye. Pictures of children. Walter talk on phone. Merchandise ready for pickup. A cold shiver ran down Rosalie's spine. The implications were horrifying. Was Walter part of some trafficking network? Had Felix been just one target among many? Her phone rang, interrupting her dark thoughts. It was Tyler. "Rosalie, Dr. Avery is on her way to you now," he said without preamble. "She's an animal behavioral specialist who works with law enforcement. She'll help us document everything Ulysses can tell us." "He's just said something else," Rosalie replied, her voice tight. "Something about pictures of children and merchandise ready for pickup. Tyler, I think Walter might be involved in something truly terrible." There was a weighted pause. "We found photographs in the hidden room," Tyler confirmed grimly. "Children from various locations, including several from our neighborhood. Felix appears to have been the first actual abduction, but Walter was clearly planning more." "Oh God," Rosalie whispered. "This is now a major investigation," Tyler continued. "The FBI has been called in. They'll want to hear everything Ulysses can tell us. What he's witnessed might be critical to identifying Walter's associates before they can disappear." After hanging up, Rosalie approached Ulysses with renewed purpose. The parrot was more than just a pet or even a witness now. He was their best hope of preventing other children from suffering Felix's fate. "Ulysses," she said gently, "we need your help. Can you remember anything else about the bad men? Anything about where they might be?" The parrot tilted his head, as if considering her question carefully. Then, in a perfect imitation of Walter's voice, he said, "Delivery to the harbor warehouse on Thursday. Johnson will be waiting." Rosalie quickly wrote this down, her hands trembling slightly. Harbor warehouse. Thursday. Johnson. Each word could be the key to stopping whatever terrible plans were in motion. Dr. Avery arrived 30 minutes later, a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes that belied her professional demeanor. She carried specialized recording equipment and was accompanied by a federal agent named Agent Collins, whose serious expression softened only slightly when introduced to Ulysses. "Remarkable creature," Dr. Avery murmured, observing Ulysses with expert eyes. African greys are among the most intelligent birds in the world, with extraordinary memory and mimicry capabilities. If Ulysses witnessed conversations or events related to the crime, he could indeed provide valuable evidence. They set up the recording equipment and began a careful, methodical process of documenting everything Ulysses said. Dr. Avery explained that they needed to distinguish between normal parrot talk and actual evidence, between random phrases Ulysses had picked up over time and specific things he had witnessed related to Walter and his criminal activities. What emerged over the next few hours was disturbing. Through a combination of mimicked voices, phrases, and what appeared to be fragments of overheard conversations, Ulysses painted a picture of a sophisticated operation. Walter hadn't been working alone. He had been communicating regularly with at least 2 other individuals about acquisitions, shipments, and clients with specific requests. "He's describing a trafficking network," Agent Collins stated flatly, his expression grim as he reviewed the transcripts of Ulysses' utterances. "Based on what we found in Walter's hidden room and what your parrot is telling us, Walter Davis was a collector, someone who identifies and acquires specific targets based on client requests." "Children," Rosalie whispered, feeling ill. Agent Collins nodded gravely. "The good news is that Felix appears to be the first actual abduction. We believe Walter was still in the preparation phase, gathering information and making plans. Felix may have stumbled onto something that forced Walter to act before he was ready." "That fits with what Felix has told us," Dr. Avery added. "He says he was exploring near Walter's house when he saw Walter taking pictures of the playground from his car. When Walter spotted him, he panicked and grabbed Felix, dragging him into his house through the back door." Rosalie thought about how often Felix wandered the neighborhood, his natural curiosity taking him places other children might avoid. That same curiosity might have saved countless other children from a terrible fate. "Harbor warehouse," Ulysses suddenly squawked, flapping his wings for emphasis. "Thursday, blue container." Agent Collins exchanged a meaningful look with Dr. Avery. "We need to follow up on this immediately. If there's a shipment or meeting planned at the harbor, it could be our chance to catch Walter's associates." As they were packing up their equipment, Rosalie's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Irene, along with a woman and a small boy she immediately recognized as Felix and his mother, Mrs. Miller. Felix's face lit up when he saw Ulysses. "That's him. That's the bird that saved me," he exclaimed, his recent ordeal momentarily forgotten in his excitement. "We wanted to thank you both," Mrs. Miller said, her eyes brimming with grateful tears. "The officers told us we wouldn't have found Felix if it wasn't for your parrot." Rosalie invited them in, touched by their visit. Felix approached Ulysses' perch with appropriate caution under Rosalie's guidance. "Hello, Ulysses," the boy said softly. "Thank you for helping me." Ulysses cocked his head, studying Felix with intelligent eyes. "Felix safe now," he declared, repeating the phrase Rosalie had used the night before. Felix giggled, delighted by the parrot's response. "He knows my name." While Felix chatted with Ulysses under Dr. Avery's fascinated observation, Mrs. Miller pulled Rosalie aside. "They told me what they found in that monster's house," she whispered, her voice breaking. "All those photographs of children. Felix wasn't the only one he was watching. If your parrot hadn't—" She couldn't finish the sentence, overcome with emotion. Rosalie squeezed her hand in silent understanding. The full horror of what might have happened, not just to Felix but to other children, was almost too much to comprehend. Their moment was interrupted by Agent Collins, who had been on the phone in the kitchen. "We've identified a warehouse at the harbor matching Ulysses' description," he announced. "There's a shipping container registered to a company we now believe is a front for this operation. We're organizing surveillance immediately." Irene stepped forward. "I should get Felix and Mrs. Miller home now. They've both been through enough, and Felix needs rest." As they prepared to leave, Felix turned back to Ulysses once more. "Bye, Ulysses. I'll come visit you again soon." Ulysses bobbed his head in what looked remarkably like a nod. "Felix visit. Bring treats." Everyone laughed, the tension in the room momentarily broken by the parrot's apparent attempt at negotiation. But as the door closed behind Felix and his mother, The gravity of the situation settled over those who remained. "I want to help with the harbor operation," Rosalie said suddenly, surprising herself with her own boldness. Agent Collins shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. This is now a federal investigation involving dangerous criminals. We appreciate everything you and Ulysses have done, but from here on you need to leave it to professionals." "But Ulysses is the best witness you have," Rosalie argued. "What if there's something else he remembers that could be crucial? Something triggered by seeing the warehouse or hearing the voices of these other men?" Dr. Avery looked thoughtful. "She has a point. Contextual cues can be powerful memory triggers, especially for creatures like Ulysses, who associate sounds and sights very strongly." After much debate, a compromise was reached. Rosalie and Ulysses would be permitted to accompany the surveillance team to the harbor, but would remain at a safe distance inside a secure vehicle with Irene. If Ulysses showed any sign of recognition or offered new information, they would immediately relay it to the tactical team. That evening, as preparations for the harbor operation were finalized, Rosalie sat alone with Ulysses in her living room. The events of the past 2 days had transformed her ordinary life into something unrecognizable, thrusting her and her extraordinary parrot into the center of a dangerous criminal investigation. "Are you sure about this?" she asked Ulysses softly, stroking his feathers. "It could be dangerous." Ulysses leaned into her touch, his eyes half closed with contentment. "Help children," he said simply, using Rosalie's own voice. Tears pricked at her eyes. Whether Ulysses truly understood the significance of what was happening or was simply mimicking phrases he'd heard, the effect was the same. They had stumbled onto something dark and terrible, and now they had a responsibility to see it through to the end. As night fell, Rosalie prepared Ulysses' travel cage and packed a small bag for herself. According to the information Walter had unwittingly provided through Ulysses, whatever was planned at the harbor warehouse would happen tomorrow. They would be in position well before then, watching and waiting for Walter's associates to appear. The knowledge that children's lives might hang in the balance weighed heavily on Rosalie's mind as she tried unsuccessfully to sleep. In the living room, Ulysses was uncharacteristically silent, as if he too sensed the gravity of what lay ahead. Dawn broke grey and misty over the harbor, the early light revealing a landscape of steel containers, towering cranes, and weathered warehouses. Rosalie sat in the back of an unmarked van with Ulysses' cage secured beside her. Irene was in the driver's seat, her attention fixed on the radio communication from the surveillance teams positioned throughout the area. The warehouse Ulysses had identified stood 100 yards away, a nondescript building with peeling blue paint and a rusted metal roof. Nothing about its exterior suggested the sinister purpose it might serve, yet Rosalie felt a chill when she looked at it. "Blue container by water," Ulysses suddenly announced, startling both women. "Blue container with white mark." Irene immediately relayed this information through her radio. Within minutes, confirmation came back. There was indeed a blue shipping container near the water's edge, with a distinctive white mark on its side. "He's right again," Irene murmured, glancing back at Ulysses with newfound respect. For hours, they watched and waited. Ulysses remained remarkably composed in his travel cage, occasionally mimicking the sound of the seagulls wheeling overhead or the distant foghorns from ships entering the harbor. Just after noon, activity finally began around the warehouse. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up, and 2 men emerged. Rosalie couldn't make out their features at this distance, but she saw Ulysses suddenly become alert, his head bobbing agitatedly. "Bad men," he squawked. "Meeting about children." Irene spoke urgently into her radio, relaying Ulysses' reaction and requesting visual confirmation of the men's identities. Through high-powered surveillance equipment, the team confirmed that one of the men matched the description of Johnson, a name that had appeared in documents found in Walter's hidden room. As they watched, a second vehicle arrived, a panel van with company markings that Irene identified as belonging to the suspected front organization. The driver stayed inside while a third man emerged from the passenger side, carrying what looked like a laptop case. "That's Mercer," Irene informed Rosalie, her voice tight with controlled excitement. "He's been on our radar for months in connection with other cases, but we've never had enough evidence to move on him." Ulysses became increasingly agitated as the men entered the warehouse. Children coming. Payment first. Special order. Rosalie felt sick. The casual way these men discussed trafficking children as if they were talking about any other commodity was beyond comprehension. Things moved quickly after that. Based on what they were hearing from Ulysses and seeing through surveillance, Agent Collins made the decision to move in. The operation unfolded with military precision, federal agents and local police converging on the warehouse from multiple directions, cutting off any possibility of escape. From their vantage point in the van, Rosalie and Irene could hear the distant sounds of the raid, shouted commands, the brief wail of a siren cut short. Ulysses remained unnervingly silent, his eyes fixed on the warehouse, as if he could see through its walls to the drama unfolding within. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably less than 15 minutes, Irene's radio crackled to life. "Suspects in custody," came Agent Collins's terse update. "Evidence secured, no injuries." Rosalie let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Is it over?" she asked Irene. The officer's expression was cautiously optimistic. "It's a major breakthrough. With these arrests and the evidence they've secured, they can dismantle a significant part of this network." "But is it all of them?" Rosalie pressed, remembering Ulysses' ominous words about more bad men. As if in answer to her question, Ulysses suddenly spoke in a voice they hadn't heard before, deeper, with a slight accent. "Contact our people in the East Coast operation. We need to accelerate the timeline now that Davis is compromised." Irene stared at the Parrot, then grabbed her radio with renewed urgency. "We need to record this immediately. There's an East Coast operation he's referring to." The information Ulysses provided in that moment would prove crucial in expanding the investigation beyond their local jurisdiction. What had begun with Walter Davis in a quiet neighborhood had led them to the edge of exposing a network that spanned multiple states. As the sun began to set over the harbor, casting long shadows across the water, Rosalie watched the suspects being led from the warehouse in handcuffs. Each arrest represented children who would now be safe, families who would remain whole. All because a Parrot had been watching from his perch, remembering what he saw and heard, and finding a way to communicate it when it mattered most. "You did it, Ulysses," she whispered, reaching through the bars of his travel cage to gently stroke his feathers. "You saved them all." Ulysses preened under her touch, his bright eyes reflecting the last golden rays of sunlight. "Ulysses, good bird," he declared, with what sounded remarkably like pride. The drive back to Rosalie's house was quiet, both women and bird exhausted by the day's tension and ultimate triumph. But as they turned onto her street, something made Rosalie sit up sharply. "Stop the car," she said suddenly. Irene frowned but complied, pulling over to the curb. "What is it?" Rosalie was staring at a sedan parked a few houses down from her own, a vehicle she didn't recognize. "Who's that? Should there be someone watching my house?" Irene followed her gaze, her expression shifting from confusion to alertness. "No, all our units are at the harbor, or processing the suspects." She reached for her radio, keeping her voice low. "This is Officer Banks. I need a check on a vehicle near the Chen residence." Before she could provide the license plate number, Ulysses let out a sound that made both women freeze, the distinctive click of a gun being cocked, followed by a voice neither of them had heard before. "They missed someone," Rosalie whispered, her blood running cold. "There's someone waiting at my house." Irene immediately called for backup, her training taking over as she assessed the situation. "We're not going anywhere near that house until additional units arrive." They waited in tense silence, parked just out of sight of Rosalie's home. Ulysses had fallen unusually still, his eyes fixed in the direction of the house, as if he could see through the distance to whatever threat lurked there. When backup finally arrived, the officers approached the suspicious vehicle with caution, only to find it empty. A search of the immediate area revealed nothing, but when they carefully entered Rosalie's house, the signs of an intruder were unmistakable. A forced back door, drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. "They were looking for something," Agent Collins said when he arrived from the harbor operation. "Probably any evidence you might have that wasn't already in our possession." Rosalie hugged Ulysses' cage close to her chest, suddenly overwhelmed by how close they might have come to disaster. if Ulysses hadn't mimicked that sound, if she hadn't noticed the unfamiliar car. "You can't stay here tonight," Irene said firmly. "It's not safe. We don't know if they'll come back." Arrangements were quickly made for Rosalie and Ulysses to be relocated to a secure location, a hotel under police protection where they would remain until the immediate threat was assessed and neutralized. As Rosalie gathered essential items from her house under the watchful eyes of armed officers, she felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. They had struck a significant blow against this criminal network today, but it was clear that the danger wasn't entirely past. Somewhere out there, someone connected to Walter Davis knew about her and Ulysses and viewed them as a threat that needed to be eliminated. In the quiet of her hotel room later that night, with Ulysses settled on a makeshift perch beside her bed and an officer stationed outside her door, Rosalie finally allowed herself to process everything that had happened. In the span of just a few days, her ordinary life had been completely upended. She had gone from being a quiet homeowner with a remarkable pet to a key witness in a federal investigation, a target for dangerous criminals, and part of an ongoing operation to dismantle a child trafficking network. And it had all begun with Ulysses, perceptive, intelligent Ulysses, noticing something wrong and finding a way to communicate it. The parrot was currently grooming his feathers, a perfectly normal behavior that contrasted sharply with the extraordinary role he had played in recent events. "What happens now?" she asked softly, not really expecting an answer. Ulysses paused in his grooming, fixing her with one bright eye. "Keep Felix safe," he said simply. "Keep all safe." Rosalie nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Yes, that was exactly what they would do. However long it took, whatever it required of them, they would see this through to the end. They would make sure Felix, and all the other children who might have been targeted, remained safe. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering gently against the hotel window. The sound was soothing, almost hypnotic, carrying away some of the day's tension. Rosalie lay back on the unfamiliar bed, watching as Ulysses tucked his head under his wing, finally succumbing to exhaustion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more interviews, more evidence to process, perhaps even testimony to prepare. The path ahead was uncertain, possibly dangerous. But in this moment of quiet, with her extraordinary parrot sleeping peacefully nearby, Rosalie found a measure of peace in knowing they had already accomplished something remarkable. They had given voice to the voiceless, shed light on hidden darkness, and brought hope where there might otherwise have been only tragedy. Whatever came next, that knowledge would sustain them both. As sleep finally claimed her, Rosalie's last conscious thought was a silent promise, to Felix, to the other children who had been at risk, and to Ulysses himself. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but they wouldn't stop until it was, until every child was safe, every criminal brought to justice, and every dark corner of this network exposed to the light of day. Together, they would make sure of it. Morning light filtered through the hotel curtains as Rosalie awoke to the sound of Ulysses' gentle chirping. 2 weeks had passed since the harbor raid, and while they were no longer in immediate danger, the investigation continued to unfold in ways that kept them both under protective custody. "Good morning, Ulysses," Rosalie said, stretching as she got out of bed. The hotel room had become a temporary home, comfortable enough, but lacking the warmth and personality of her own space. "Morning, Rosalie," Ulysses replied, bobbing his head in greeting. "Breakfast time?" She smiled, reaching for the fresh fruit she'd prepared the night before. Some things remained constant, even in the midst of extraordinary circumstances, Ulysses' morning appetite being one of them. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Tyler, who had become their primary contact with the investigation team. His expression as he entered was more relaxed than Rosalie had seen in days. "We've identified the intruder at your house," he said without preamble. "Vincent Mercer, brother of James Mercer, one of the men arrested at the harbor. He was trying to find and destroy any evidence you might have had at home." "Did you catch him?" Rosalie asked, offering Ulysses a piece of apple. Tyler nodded, his satisfaction evident. "Last night, trying to cross the Canadian border. And here's the interesting part. When they searched his belongings, they found documentation linking the entire operation to a shell company based in Maine. That connection has led to 5 more arrests this morning. The East Coast operation, Rosalie murmured, remembering Ulysses' mimicked words. Exactly. Your parrot's intelligence has been invaluable. The FBI believes we've now identified every major player in the network. Ulysses, seemingly aware he was being discussed, preened importantly. There's more, Tyler continued, sitting down across from Rosalie. Felix's statement, combined with evidence from Walter's hidden room and subsequent arrests, has given us a complete picture of how this operation worked. Walter wasn't just a random predator. He was strategically placed in your neighborhood because of its proximity to several schools and the number of affluent families in the area. The thought made Rosalie shudder. The idea that their peaceful community had been deliberately targeted was deeply disturbing. Walter had been gathering information for months, Tyler explained, taking photographs, noting children's routines, identifying those who might be particularly vulnerable. Felix was never actually his target. Felix simply saw too much and forced Walter's hand. A mistake that brought down their entire operation, Rosalie observed. That, and an African grey parrot with extraordinary observational skills. Tyler smiled at Ulysses, who was watching him intently. Which brings me to my next point. The prosecutor wants to meet with you both today. They're preparing the federal case against Walter and his associates, and Ulysses' contributions need to be formally documented. Later that morning, Rosalie found herself in a conference room at the federal building, Ulysses perched comfortably on a special stand beside her. Across the table sat Assistant U.S. Attorney Helen Clark, a formidable woman whose sharp eyes continually darted between Rosalie and the parrot. "I've been practicing law for 20 years, Clark said, "and I've never encountered a witness quite like Ulysses. We're in uncharted legal territory here." Dr. Avery, who had been called in to consult, spoke up. "There's substantial scientific precedent for the reliability of African grey parrots as mimics. Their ability to reproduce human speech with perfect intonation is well documented. What makes Ulysses exceptional is the context-appropriate nature of his mimicry. He doesn't just repeat random phrases. He appears to understand when and why to use them." "Can we really use a parrot's testimony in court?" Rosalie asked uncertainly. "Not directly," Clark admitted. "But the recordings we've made of Ulysses repeating conversations he overheard can be entered as supporting evidence, especially since many of his utterances have already been corroborated by physical evidence and the testimony of human witnesses." They spent hours going through transcripts of Ulysses' recorded statements, with Clark methodically connecting each one to other evidence in the case. Occasionally, Ulysses would offer a new phrase or voice, triggering rushed consultations and note-taking. By late afternoon, Clark seemed satisfied. "We have more than enough to put Walter and his associates away for decades. The evidence against them is overwhelming, thanks in no small part to your extraordinary companion, Ms. Chen." As if understanding the compliment, Ulysses fluffed his feathers and declared, "Ulysses, good bird. Help children." Everyone in the room smiled, momentarily united by the simple truth of the parrot's statement. On their way back to the hotel, Tyler had news that lifted Rosalie's spirits even further. "The security assessment of your house is complete. We've installed new locks, an alarm system, and reinforced doors and windows. You and Ulysses can go home tomorrow if you'd like." The prospect of returning to her own space, her own routines, filled Rosalie with longing. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of interviews, evidence reviews, and protective custody. The chance to reclaim some normalcy, even with the investigation ongoing, was deeply appealing. "What about the remaining danger?" she asked cautiously. "Vincent Mercer is in custody, but are there others who might?" "Every person identified through the investigation is either in custody or under surveillance," Tyler assured her. "The threat assessment team believes you can safely return home, though we'll maintain a protective detail for a while longer, just as a precaution." The next morning, as Rosalie packed their few belongings, Ulysses watched from his travel cage, occasionally offering commentary. "Going home," he said, his tone conveying what seemed remarkably like satisfaction. "Home good." "Yes, Ulysses," Rosalie agreed, carefully wrapping his favorite toys. "Home is very good." When they arrived at her house, Rosalie was touched to discover that someone, probably Irene or another officer, had cleaned up the mess left by the break-in. Fresh flowers stood in a vase on the kitchen table, and a welcome home card sat propped against them. Ulysses immediately flew to his favorite perch by the window, surveying his domain with obvious pleasure. "Home," he declared again, his feathers settling comfortably. Rosalie was hanging up her coat when the doorbell rang. Tyler stood on her porch, accompanied by Felix and his mother. "We heard you were coming home today," Mrs. Miller explained, her smile warm. "Felix insisted on being here to welcome you both back." The boy stepped forward, clutching a small, carefully wrapped package. "This is for Ulysses," he said shyly, "to say thank you for saving me." Inside the package was a beautiful new toy for Ulysses, colorful wooden blocks and beads that would challenge his dexterity and intelligence. The parrot examined it with great interest, clearly approving of Felix's choice. "I asked my mum if I could come visit Ulysses sometimes," Felix continued, looking hopefully at Rosalie. "To play with him and maybe teach him new words?" Rosalie glanced at Mrs. Miller, who nodded her agreement. "We'd both like that," Rosalie answered warmly. "I think Ulysses would enjoy having a special friend visit him." "Felix visit. Bring treats," Ulysses chimed in, causing everyone to laugh. As summer turned to autumn, life in the neighborhood gradually returned to a new kind of normal. Walter Davis's house stood empty, its contents removed as evidence, its future uncertain. The criminal trials were progressing, with most of the defendants pleading guilty in the face of overwhelming evidence. Rosalie had returned to her work as a freelance graphic designer, though her schedule now included regular meetings with prosecutors and occasional interviews with journalists, interested in Ulysses' remarkable role in breaking the case. She declined most media requests, protective of her privacy and Ulysses' well-being, but she did agree to participate in an educational documentary about animal intelligence being produced by a respected university. Felix became a regular visitor, his friendship with Ulysses deepening as they spent hours together. The parrot seemed to enjoy teaching the boy as much as learning from him, and Felix's parents noted that their son had become more confident and outgoing since the friendship began. One crisp October afternoon, Rosalie was working in her home office when Irene stopped by with news. "Walter Davis was sentenced today," she announced as they sat in Rosalie's kitchen, Ulysses watching intently from his nearby perch. 30 years without possibility of parole. The judge made special mention of the evidence provided by Ulysses, calling it unusual but compelling. 30 years, Rosalie repeated, the weight of it settling around her. It seemed both infinite and somehow insufficient for the harm Walter had intended to cause. "The others received similar sentences," Irene continued, "and the FBI has confirmed that every identified member of the network is now in custody. It's over, Rosalie. Really over." That evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Rosalie sat on her porch with a cup of tea, Ulysses perched contentedly on the railing beside her. The protective detail had finally been withdrawn last week, leaving her truly alone for the first time in months. "We did something important, didn't we, Ulysses?" she mused, more to herself than to the parrot. Ulysses turned his head, regarding her with one bright eye. "Save children," he said simply. "Family safe now?" Rosalie smiled, wondering yet again at the depth of understanding this remarkable creature seemed to possess. Was he merely echoing phrases he'd heard, or did he truly comprehend the significance of what they'd done together? Perhaps it didn't matter. Whether Ulysses understood in human terms or in his own avian way, the outcome was the same. Children who might have been harmed were now safe, families that might have been shattered remained whole, and a dark network that had operated in the shadows had been exposed to the light of justice. Down the street, Rosalie could see Felix riding his bicycle, a new confidence in his posture. The boy who had been a victim had emerged as something of a hero in his own right, his courage in testifying against Walter earning him the admiration of the entire community. "Felix come tomorrow?" Ulysses asked, following Rosalie's gaze. "Yes," she confirmed. "He's bringing a new book to read with you." The parrot bobbed his head in what looked remarkably like anticipation. His vocabulary had expanded considerably under Felix's tutelage, though thankfully he no longer needed to use it to warn of danger or expose criminals. As darkness fell and stars began to appear overhead, Rosalie reflected on the extraordinary journey they had taken together. What had begun with Ulysses' desperate cries of "basement, basement," had led to the dismantling of an entire criminal enterprise and the forming of unexpected bonds between a boy and a bird, between neighbors who had barely known each other before, between ordinary citizens and the law enforcement professionals who had worked alongside them. For Rosalie, the experience had transformed her understanding of her quiet companion. Ulysses had always been intelligent and observant, but she had never fully appreciated the depth of his perception or his capacity for what could only be described as compassion. His determination to communicate what he had witnessed, to make himself understood when it mattered most, had revealed something profound about the connection between all living beings. Inside the house, the telephone rang, pulling Rosalie from her thoughts. It was Tyler, calling with news that the last of Walter's associates had accepted a plea deal, bringing the case to its final resolution. "The U.S. attorney wanted me to tell you personally," he said. "They're creating a special commendation for Ulysses, first of its kind." Rosalie laughed, imagining how Ulysses might react to a formal ceremony. "I think he'd prefer some premium nuts and a new puzzle toy." "We'll arrange for both," Tyler promised, his smile evident in his voice. After hanging up, Rosalie returned to the porch where Ulysses waited patiently. The night had fully descended now, the neighborhood peaceful under a canopy of stars. "It's really over, Ulysses," she told him, gently stroking his feathers. "Everyone is safe now." Ulysses leaned into her touch, his eyes half closed with contentment. "Home safe," he agreed. "Family safe." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet of an ordinary evening, Rosalie understood that while their adventure had reached its conclusion, its impact would continue to ripple outward, through the lives they had touched, the children they had protected, and the bonds they had formed. The extraordinary parrot who had once desperately cried, "Basement, basement," to save a child he had never met, had changed their community forever, reminding them all that heroes come in many forms, that courage knows no species, and that sometimes the most powerful voice is the one that speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves. As for Ulysses, he seemed perfectly content to return to his role as a beloved pet, though his newfound celebrity status ensured he received an abundance of treats and attention from visitors. If he understood the magnitude of what he had accomplished, he showed no sign of it, except perhaps in the watchful, intelligent gaze he still turned toward the neighborhood each day, ever observant, ever protective of the community he had helped to save. In the end, perhaps that was Ulysses' greatest gift, not just the evidence he had provided or the network he had helped expose, but the simple reminder that in a world often filled with darkness, there would always be those, human and otherwise, willing to sound the alarm, to stand against evil and to be a voice for the voiceless. And in that knowledge, Rosalie found a peace that had seemed impossible in the dark days after Felix's abduction, a faith in the fundamental goodness of life and in the unexpected heroes who emerge when they are needed most. If you enjoyed this exploration into fascinating and compelling narratives, kindly indicate your appreciation by liking this video. Are you watching on mobile? Show your appreciation with a double tap for hype. For more captivating stories and journeys into the heart of compelling storytelling, please subscribe to the channel and activate notifications so you don't miss a single upload. Your thoughts and interpretations are most welcome. Please share your perspectives on today's story in the comments below. And if you believe others would find this content engaging, please consider sharing the video with your network. Until our next journey into the world of captivating tales, I bid you farewell.